"Why, God? Why me?" Naomi cried out, her tears blending into the cold Ashanti stream as the guards forced her to drink it sip by sip. Her belly was heavy, her heart shattered after witnessing her husband collapse in a pool of blood. The world was nothing but darkness. She was no longer just a wife, a mother awaiting her first child. She had become the victim of a king without a heart, a monster disguised as a man. Yet at that very moment, when it seemed everything had ended, her body suddenly trembled. A golden light from fish-like scales began to spread across her skin. Naomi did not die. She was awakening. Do you dare to keep listening? To witness the journey of a fragile woman transforming into an immortal legend? If you walk away now, you will miss the chance to see the most terrifying and beautiful rebirth ever told. The resounding cry echoed through every street like a death knell. King Kofi is coming. The bustling laughter of the marketplace instantly fell silent. People dropped their baskets in panic, prostrating themselves on the ground, foreheads pressed against the scorching dry dust. In that moment, the entire village of Zion Hill resembled a lifeless painting, with nothing left but the pounding of frantic hearts and the trembling breaths of fragile souls. Amidst the sea of bowed heads, Naomi staggered. Her heavy belly weighed down her body, each step feeling like a battle of its own. Cold sweat trickled down her temples, her hands clutching tightly a bag of fried yams and roasted bananas she had just bought at the market, clinging to a shred of simple joy. Beside her, Malik, her humble husband, frantically reached out to shield his wife's head, trying to force her lower. But in their rush, they were too late. The thunder of hooves rolled like storm clouds, dust rising into the air, and the king's figure appeared. Kofi sat firmly upon his black stallion, his cold eyes sweeping across the rows of prostrate villagers. Suddenly, his gaze stopped. A woman, her belly swollen, her breath ragged, had not bowed as the others did. Beside her, a man strained with all his might to shield her, as if daring to resist the heavens themselves. In that instant, even the wind in the village seemed to cease, every heart seized in suffocating dread. Kofi's face darkened. He yanked the reins, halting his horse directly before them. A terrifying silence fell, broken only by the frantic pounding of Naomi's heart in her chest. To the villagers, the king's glare was like lightning tearing through the night, an omen of calamity about to descend. Malik trembled as he fell forward to his knees, his voice catching in his throat. He wanted to plead, to explain that his wife was too heavily pregnant to keep up, that they had no intent to offend. But before the words could form, the king's fury erupted. Kofi twisted, seizing the gun from a guard's hand. Without a word, without a second's hesitation, he raised it and pulled the trigger. The gunshot roared in broad daylight. Blood spurted forth, soaking into the barren dust. Malik collapsed before his wife's eyes, his gaze frozen wide open, as though trying to etch forever the image of the woman he had sworn to protect. Naomi screamed, her cry of anguish ripping through the silence, shattering the air. Her arms reached out in desperation, but touched nothing but the fading smoke of gunpowder carried away by the wind. All of Zion Hill fell into stunned silence. None dared breathe deeply, none dared lift their heads. Yet within them, a cold terror surged. They had witnessed an innocent man executed for bowing a moment too late and a pregnant woman condemned as sacrifice to the arrogance of the throne. Naomi crumpled, trembling hands clutching her belly, tears streaming as though to wash the heavens themselves. But no flood could cleanse the crime laid bare before their eyes. Without another word, Kofi lowered his gun and turned to his guards. A merciless nod that was enough. Two burly soldiers lunged forward, seizing Naomi. She screamed, struggling like a bird with torn wings, but the weight of her unborn child and the agony of loss left her body nearly paralyzed. The gods' calloused hands gripped her frail arms, dragging her across the rough ground. Bound tightly, Naomi's wide eyes fixed on her husband's body as it faded into the distance. In that gaze burned despair, fury, and profound helplessness. Every scream broke apart in her chest, leaving only the relentless pounding of a heart ready to burst. The villagers stood frozen, watching. Some lowered their faces in silent tears, others whispered through trembling breaths, "He will take her to the Ashanti, the river of fate, where no one returns the same." The name of that river, Ashanti, was passed down like a curse. It was said that whoever was submerged in its waters would lose their soul forever, becoming a wandering ghost trapped between two worlds. And now, Naomi, the woman, carrying a new life within her, had been chosen as the sacrifice. Dragged along, she turned her head one last time. Malik's face had stiffened in death, yet his eyes remained wide open, as if still trying to follow her. That image pierced straight into Naomi's heart, shredding every last strand of hope. Horses neighed, hooves pounded, and the escorting soldiers pressed forward toward the riverbank. The evening sun spilled long shadows, painting the river's surface in fiery red. The villagers followed silently from afar, too afraid to draw near, yet unable to turn away. They knew they were witnessing the beginning of a storm, a moment that would haunt Zion Hill for generations. Naomi was thrown onto the cold sand, the rope biting into her wrists. The gentle lapping of waves mocked her, the stench of damp moss filling the air. She closed her eyes, salty tears dripping onto the dust, as though the earth itself wept with her. A tragic scene, a cruel destiny all born from a single delayed bow. But was it truly coincidence, or had fate already written Naomi's path into inevitability? Before we continue, imagine yourself as Naomi. Would you have the strength to cry out and fight against fate, or would you surrender to tyranny? Tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing viewers from all over gather here. Or simply comment one if you find this story compelling and wish to hear what happens next. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting us know where you're watching this video from. The deep sound of drums rumbled from afar, each beat striking the ground like the signal of an impending execution. The soldiers dragged Naomi forward while the villagers timidly followed behind, their eyes filled with fear mingled with pity. The slanted afternoon sun cast its crimson glow upon wrinkled faces, dyeing the entire scene in the color of blood. Naomi was bound tightly, her arms stiff behind her back, the rope biting so deep it drew blood. The heavy steps of the pregnant woman scraped against the gravelly earth, leaving long scratches across her skin. She could no longer cry, her throat was parched and burning. All that remained was the sound of labored breathing and her vacant gaze, haunted by the vivid memory of her husband's collapse. They passed rows of silent, thatched houses. No one dared lift their heads, but Naomi knew eyes were furtively watching. Some covered their mouths to stifle sobs. Others clutched their children tightly, shielding them from the heart-wrenching sight. All were powerless before the iron law of the tyrant. The path toward the banks of the Ashanti stream grew clearer. It was the stream that generations of villagers believed housed a sacred force, one that both nourished and punished. People came there to pray, but when forced upon it, it became a death sentence. A chilling mist rose from the water, blending with the howling wind through the wild grass, sending shivers through Naomi's body. At the water's edge, the soldiers stopped. They hauled Naomi up, dragging her toward a large boulder jutting into the stream. The crowd gathered behind, whispering as if watching an ancient ritual they feared yet could not look away from. A wooden bowl was filled with water from the stream, its dark green surface reflecting the fading sunset. Naomi's chin was seized, her mouth forced open. The briny, foul-smelling liquid rushed down her throat, choking her until she coughed violently. More gulps were forced upon her, spilling down the corners of her lips, soaking her thin garment. Naomi's body began to tremble, her belly hardened, her limbs prickling with 1,000 needles. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "It is the punishment of the demon. She will never return." Mothers quickly covered their children's eyes, unwilling to let them etch this nightmare into memory. Naomi tilted her face toward the sky, her breath faltering, her heart pounding in chaos. Then something strange began to happen. Veins across her skin glowed, faint golden light shimmering in the twilight. Her flesh seemed to ignite from within. The crowd recoiled, some screaming in terror. Naomi's legs slowly lost their familiar shape. Bones and joints dissolved, skin fused together, and in their place emerged a shimmering tail covered in golden scales. Each scale glistened like a shard of mirror catching the sun, setting the entire stream ablaze with light. The villagers held their breath, unable to believe their eyes. Naomi no longer had the strength to resist. She collapsed, half her body submerged in the water, the other half pinned upon the boulder. In her delirium, a voice echoed not from outside, but from deep within her mind. "You are the daughter of the sea. You do not die, you are reborn." The whisper resounded like crashing waves, like thousands of droplets uniting as one. It not only soothed her pain, but also unlocked a hidden door of destiny. Naomi's eyes fluttered closed, her body exhausted, her breath weakened, her consciousness fading. Yet her form still glowed like a lighthouse in the descending night. The crowd recoiled in fear, some falling to their knees in whispered prayers for forgiveness. They knew they had witnessed something far beyond human understanding. In an instant, the surface of the Ashanti stream churned with strange whirlpools, as though an invisible hand stirred its depths. White foam burst forth, mingling with the shrieking wind that sounded like the curse of a god. Naomi collapsed, unconscious, yet the radiance of her body lingered in the eyes of all who had seen. That night, word spread across Zion Hill. They whispered that the king had violated a sacred taboo, that the spirit of the sea had entered an innocent woman. From that moment on, the fragile peace of the village dissolved. Some believed Naomi was dead, her soul swept away into the depths of the stream. Others swore she had become a goddess of vengeance, a mermaid clad in golden scales, destined to return for justice. Children trembled as they clung to their mothers, while the elders gazed silently toward the palace, their eyes heavy with ominous foreboding. As for Kofi, the cruel king, he cared nothing. To him, it was nothing more than a spectacle, a display of the throne's absolute power. But little did he know, from the moment Naomi's lips touched the waters of Ashanti, the fate of all Zion Hill had turned to a new page. 3 days after the tragedy at the banks of the Ashanti stream, Zion Hill was shrouded in an indescribable grief. In the narrow alleys, hushed conversations never ceased. People spoke of the radiant golden light surrounding Naomi, of the fishtail shimmering with scales like pure gold. Some trembled, calling it an omen of death. Others believed it was the sign of a reborn deity. But all agreed on one thing. From that moment on, Zion Hill would never know peace again. In the sky above, crows gathered, blanketing the thatched rooftops, their cries echoing like a dirge. At nightfall, mist from the Ashanti stream crept into the village, ghostly and haunting. Villagers struggled to close their eyes, only to jolt awake in terror, startled by voices calling Naomi's name rising from the depths of the water. Children wailed, the adults whispered prayers, begging the darkness to spare their village. In that heavy atmosphere, Elder Jabari, the aged priest of Zion Hill, resolved to confront the king. He was a man who had lived through more than 70 rainy seasons, his hair white as clouds, his eyes deep as though carrying the memories of the earth itself. From childhood, Jabari had been entrusted with the ancestral prophecy. When the Ashanti stream grew wrathful, blood would stain the throne. He knew that the prophecy was now taking form. That morning, Jabari leaned upon his staff and made his way toward the palace. The path led him across the square, the very place where only 3 days before the villagers had cowered beneath Kofi's horse hooves. They recognized the priest's figure and bowed in silence, their eyes following him with hope. To them, Jabari was not merely the keeper of rituals, He was the final voice of the gods. The palace loomed ahead, its domes of burnished bronze gleaming under the scorching sunday. Around it, guards stood rigid as statues, hands gripping their weapons. Jabari did not falter. He walked straight into the great hall, his staff striking the stone floor with a deep, resonant thud, as if to remind all that truth was approaching. Upon the throne, Kofi reclined, his face still tainted with the satisfaction of what he had done. He cared nothing for the murmurs outside, nor the fear that had seeped into every home. To Kofi, the life or death of a villager was nothing but a tool to affirm his power. Jabari knelt, but his eyes did not lower. He gazed directly at the cruel king, his voice raspy yet firm. "King Kofi, the gods are enraged. Do not allow outsiders into Zion Hill, for disaster awaits at the threshold." His words reverberated throughout the hall, echoing against the stone walls like a verdict. But the reply was only Kofi's arrogant laughter. He leapt up, descending a few steps, his eyes glinting with the madness of a tyrant. "What god dares oppose me? You spread fear in vain. I alone decide the fate of this land." Jabari shook his head, his frail shoulders trembling, yet his gaze remained steadfast. He knew he was placing his life at risk, but the truth had to be spoken. When the wrath of the Ashanti rises, not even your throne will save you. Do not scorn the omen, for the blood of the innocent cries out from beneath the waters. For a fleeting moment, silence engulfed the hall. Wind swept through the tall windows, rattling the heavy drapes. A few courtiers pressed themselves against the walls, their faces lowered, shaken by the priest's words. Yet Kofi refused to be swayed. He burst into booming laughter, the sound clanging against the vaulted ceilings like screeching iron. "You are old, Jabari. How many times in your life have you spoken such words? Never once have the gods shown themselves, and they never will. All of it is but the scare tactics of the weak. Go now, before I lose my temper." Jabari tightened his grip on the staff and drew a deep breath. He knew he could not change a heart drowned in arrogance. He lowered his head, not in submission, but to conceal the sorrow in his eyes. With slow, deliberate steps, he left the palace, the sound of his staff striking the floor, echoing behind him heavier than any warning he could have spoken. Outside, the villagers waited. They looked upon him with questioning eyes, yearning for a glimmer of hope. But Jabari remained silent, his aged face carved with the deep lines of worry. He understood that once the king had turned away from the warning, nothing could stand in the path of the god's fury. That day, the sky over Zion Hill turned gray, and winds from the Ashanti stream blew fiercely as though intent on sweeping everything away. Flocks of birds scattered, their cries sharp with alarm. The villagers looked toward the stream that had swallowed Naomi, and in every heart rose the same fear. Had the soul of the golden-scaled mermaid awakened, bearing punishment for the entire village? After days steeped in heavy silence, Zion Hill once again entered a bustling market day. The lively sounds of buyers and sellers filled the square, but beneath the chatter and laughter lingered an unease that had yet to fade. Eyes occasionally glanced toward the Ashanti stream, as if to remind one another that calamity still hung overhead. Amid the crowd, a strange young woman suddenly appeared. She wore a blazing red brocade dress, woven with ancient patterns rarely seen in the village. Each of her steps was graceful, yet there seemed to be an inexplicable pull that drew every gaze toward her. Her skin glowed beneath the sunlight, her long hair flowed with the wind, and within her deep eyes lay something unfathomable. The villagers whispered, "Where did she come from? Why have we never seen her at the markets before?" Some guessed she came from a village beyond the hill. Others claimed she belonged nowhere at all, that she was like a dream stepping out of legend. Suddenly, the pounding of hooves tore through the lively air. The crowd hurriedly prostrated themselves. King Kofi and his entourage rode into the square. He was accustomed to the sight of people groveling before him, but today, an unusual figure caught his eye. the young woman in radiant red among the kneeling masses Amari. Kofi tightened his reins, his eyes blazing as if beholding a priceless treasure. He dismounted, approaching with eyes fixed solely on her. His guards surrounded the scene, but Amari stood still. She did not bow, nor did she show fear. She looked directly at Kofi, calm, as though she had long awaited this moment. A tense silence fell. The villagers held their breath, knowing that a single wrong gesture could spark a massacre. Yet the unexpected occurred. Kofi did not grow angry. Instead, he laughed a laugh dripping with possession. With eyes glinting with desire, he declared, "From this day forth, Amari shall be my new wife." The entire square froze. Within the palace, the three queens, upon hearing the news, immediately objected. They could not believe the king would brazenly bring a stranger into the harem, shattering the already fragile order. But Kofi paid them no heed. A single cold wave of his hand silenced every word of protest. Amari did not hesitate. She calmly stepped toward the royal escort, her eyes still alight, carrying something both mysterious and defiant. Not a trace of fear, not a single tear. It was as if she knew the path she was walking and felt no tremor before throne or blade. The villagers watched quietly, their hearts overflowing with questions. Who is this woman? Why could she stand before the king without fear? Was it mere chance courage, or did she conceal a greater secret within her? That night, in the palace, the three queens sat in silence as Amari entered. Under the flickering oil lamps, she stood tall, her bearing resolute. Her smile was faint, but her eyes reflected a glimmer that sent chills through those who saw it. Kofi introduced her as though she were a precious jewel he had discovered, ignoring the angry, envious gazes that surrounded her. In the hearts of the villagers, the whispers grew louder. Some believed Amari was a messenger, sent by the gods to bring down the throne. Others feared she was a new calamity, another trial Zion Hill would be forced to endure. Yet whatever she was, all understood her arrival was no coincidence. From the moment she set foot in the palace, a new chapter had begun for all of Zion Hill. A chapter woven with both hope and peril. And in the mysterious light of Amari's eyes, it seemed the answers to what was to come were already there. Do you think you can guess what will happen next? Take a breath, relax a little, and leave a comment with one or "I'm still here" to continue listening. From the day Amari set foot in the palace, a chain of misfortunes began to descend upon Zion Hill. At first, they were small matters that could be brushed aside as coincidence. But as one event followed another, the village gradually realized an invisible hand was tightening its grip on their fate. The king's tax collectors, who once scoured the markets, gathering every coin and every basket of grain, suddenly vanished. No one knew where they had gone, leaving behind deserted roads and unfinished ledgers of debt. Crops that had flourished now withered without cause, rice stalks turning yellow overnight after a single frost. Livestock dropped dead one by one, their lifeless eyes fixed on the Ashanti stream as though their souls had been drained away. From the great house of Elder Osei came cries of grief that echoed across the village. His only son, a strong young man, suddenly collapsed in the fields, his breath extinguished before anyone could understand why. That death sowed a terrible fear. For it bore no trace of illness or accident. It was as though an unseen hand had reached out and severed the thread of life. The villagers whispered, "This is no coincidence. This is a curse. This is retribution from the Ashanti stream." And within the rumors spreading from mouth to mouth, Naomi's name surfaced again and again. They called her the golden-scaled mermaid, a soul transformed by the cruel ritual. They believed she had returned to claim justice for herself and for the unborn child she never bore. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Kofi could no longer find sleep. At night, he heard strange sounds, the slapping of water, the sobs of a woman, and songs drifting from the depths of the river. In the darkness, he felt someone standing beside him, breath hot against his ear. Each time he turned to look, there was nothing, only the icy void. Then one night, the nightmare was no longer a dream. While sitting alone in a chamber lit with torches, Kofi felt a slap strike across his face. He jolted up, blood trickling from his lip. Before he could react, a second blow, then a third crashed down. Heavy as a hammer, Kofi collapsed, his vision swimming, his mind spinning. When he looked into the bronze mirror, horror seized him. His face was twisted, swollen, his back hunched, and his eyes clouded as though veiled in mist. He screamed, but the cry echoed only through the empty corridors. Queens and guards rushed in, only to find the king sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath, muttering incoherent words. From that moment, word spread quickly. King Kofi had been punished by the gods. The people told one another that Naomi, with eyes bright as the moon and a blazing golden tail, had come to seek vengeance. They believed her spirit roamed within the shadows, wielding the power of the Ashanti stream to reclaim what had been stolen. The villagers' belief in the curse deepened. Some quietly carried offerings to the riverbank, hoping to appease its wrath. Red cloths, baskets of fruit, and silver bracelets were cast into the water. They prostrated themselves, praying through trembling lips, begging the goddess for mercy. But the stream remained silent, its only answer the howling wind and strange whirlpools that swirled up, then vanished. As for Kofi, he refused to accept that his power was slipping away. Though his face was deformed and his vision dimming, he still donned his golden robe and sat upon the throne with arrogant posture. Yet within, terror consumed him each night. He dared not extinguish the torches in his chamber, dared not walk alone through corridors whose windows faced the Ashanti. Each time the wind blew in, he shivered, hearing Naomi's whisper, "You will not escape." The appearance of Amari only deepened the villagers' conviction. They regarded her with reverence mingled with suspicion. Some called her their only hope, the one sent to end the nightmare. Others feared her, believing her unnatural calm in the palace was proof that she and Naomi shared the same source of power. Those wary eyes soon turned into conviction that the curse of the stream was unfolding, and Amari was but a piece in the gods' game. Zion Hill descended into chaos. Fear, hatred, and fragile hope tangled together like a black cloud looming above every head. In the shadows, Kofi muttered to himself, his trembling hand caressing his deformed face. This is only a dream. Only a dream. But deep down, he knew retribution had begun, and no throne could withstand the fury of the gods. As King Kofi sank deeper into decay, his body deformed and his mind consumed by fear, another movement began beyond the palace walls. Amari, the strange girl clad in the blazing red brocade dress, gradually distanced herself from the dazzling luxuries of the throne, choosing instead to step into the poor alleys of Zion Hill. She chose to blend with the suffering crowd rather than live among the treacherous silks of power. The old market, where the villagers had so often trembled and bowed as the king passed, now bore witness to something extraordinary. Amari walked quietly among the stalls. She studied each weary face, the calloused hands, the tired eyes, the endless worry for daily bread. An old woman trembled beside a basket of withered apples, not a single customer stopping. Nearby, a frail child in ragged clothes clutched an empty basket, gazing up at the crowd with pleading eyes. Amari stopped. She gently clapped her hands twice. The soft sound seemed too fragile to pierce the marketplace din, but immediately, a miracle occurred. Shoppers suddenly halted, reaching into their purses and finding a few extra gleaming coins inside. Joy spread across their faces, and none could resist the impulse to buy a few apples from the old woman. In an instant, the basket once ignored became the center of attention. One after another, people queued up, pressing coins into her trembling hands, coins they believed had been gifted from nowhere. The old woman was overwhelmed, her hands shaking as she gathered each silver piece, her lips mumbling thanks without pause. When the basket was emptied at last, tears of happiness streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. Not only she, but other vendors too suddenly found their goods sold out. Wares once unsellable vanished into eager hands. The child with the empty basket now held it full of food, shared by passers-by. Laughter, gratitude, and joyous cries rang across the Zion Hill market. The villagers looked at Amari with astonishment. They whispered and called her the bringer of blessings. Hands reached out to touch the hem of her dress, hoping a bit of luck might linger. And indeed, wherever Amari walked, the air seemed to glow, wholly different from the dark, heavy sky that had loomed over Zion Hill in recent days. But the strangest thing was not the miracles themselves. It was the light that flickered in Amari's deep eyes, a gleam reminiscent of the golden radiance once shining from Naomi's body by the Ashanti stream. Those who were perceptive swore that when Amari smiled, within that smile lingered the shadow of Naomi, the woman who had died yet still haunted the fate of the village. Some whispered that Amari and Naomi were bound by the river of destiny, that the soul of the golden-scaled mermaid had never left but had merely found another form to continue her mission. Was Amari the extension of Naomi's hand, a living proof that justice had not vanished, that the gods still watched over Zion Hill? Rumors spread quickly. Children clasped hands and ran to the market just to glimpse Amari pass by. Adults quietly laid red cloths before their doors, hoping she would walk past and leave behind a blessing. In the shadows, prayers multiplied and Amari's name became entwined with salvation. Meanwhile, within the palace, Kofi's decline worsened. Hearing that the villagers were praising Amari, he grew furious, yet he did not dare punish her openly. Even the guards and some of the queens had begun to believe in her extraordinary power. They no longer looked upon Amari as a mere slave chosen by the king, but as a living symbol, an embodiment of what all Zion Hill awaited. Amari, however, remained serene. No words of boast, no claim to be a messenger. She only sowed smiles, sowed hope, letting her small miracles ripple outward. But deep within her eyes, that strange gleam was not only the light of blessings, it held a distant sorrow, a memory of the Ashanti stream's tragedy. For Amari knew these miracles were not only gifts, they were preparations for a far greater storm yet to come. My dear viewers, stay with us for the next part that will leave you in awe. Take just a second to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know where you are watching from and what time it is for you. It is always wonderful to see people joining us from every corner of the world. One sweltering morning, as the sunlight poured down on Zion Hill like golden blades, Kofi decided to appear before his people. After days of being haunted by nightmares and invisible slaps, he yearned to prove he was still king, that the throne had not yet faltered. In blind stubbornness, Kofi draped himself in a robe, embroidered with golden thread, placed a lofty turban upon his head, and rode a black stallion straight into the market. That day, the Zion Hill market was more crowded than usual. Villagers displayed their goods, laughter and chatter mingled with the savory smoke of food. But when the king's silhouette appeared, the air tightened into silence. Men quickly bowed, women clutched their children to their chests, and frightened children hid behind their mothers' legs. All prostrated themselves, but in the furtive glances they cast upward, reverence was no longer whole. Kofi sat tall upon his horse, convincing himself he remained the center of power. Yet, he did not notice that behind him, Amari walked quietly among the crowd, her eyes blazing, following his every movement. She spoke no word, but her presence alone gave the people courage. Suddenly the wind rose. Not an ordinary breeze, but a chilling gust sweeping from the Ashanti River, coursing along rooftops and market stalls. Cloth banners whipped violently, baskets of fruit toppled, dust whirled into the air. Kofi's black horse panicked, shrieking, rearing high, then collapsing to its knees. The crowd shuddered. In that chaotic moment, the king's turban flew off, landing in a puddle of filthy water. His disheveled hair spilled out, revealing his deformed face, the legacy of those invisible blows from the night. One side of his face was grotesquely swollen, one eye clouded with haze, his back hunched so sharply he resembled not a ruler but the image of a demon. Whispers spread like wildfire. Then laughter erupted, timid at first, then swelling, rippling across the entire market. No longer did they restrain themselves. Fingers pointed straight at him, mocking words slicing through his authority. "Our king looks like a demon." Kofi froze. Never before had he felt this mockery from his own people, their eyes filled not with fear but with contempt. He clutched at his face, trying to hide the truth, but it was too late. The laughter grew louder, spreading from stall to stall, merging with fervent chatter. No one cowered anymore. They had seen the truth. The one who had ruled by fear was now nothing but a pitiful shadow. His breath came ragged, his heart pounding as if to burst. His chest tightened not from fear, but from a humiliation he had never tasted. For the first time in his life, he was no longer above, but beneath, mocked in the center of the crowd. Years of authority shattered in an instant. He stumbled, collapsing to his knees on the filthy ground. His golden robe stained with mud, his trembling hand groped for the fallen turban but found only dirty water. Hooves thundered nearby, but his horse had fled, leaving him abandoned amid the sea of people. Amari stood silently in the crowd. She did not laugh, nor did she turn away. Her gaze fixed on Kofi, as though reminding him that this disgrace was no accident. Behind the Ashanti wind, it was as if an invisible hand stirred Naomi's spirit, or the power of the violated river itself. Kofi clutched his face and fled. He shoved past bewildered guards, stumbling like a madman out of the market. The echo of laughter pursued him, clinging to every step, stripping away the royal mantle that had once made all of Zion Hill tremble. That night, the villagers did not sleep. They gathered in small clusters, retelling the moment when the turban flew, when the deformed face was revealed, when the king ran in disgrace. For them, it was the first time they had seen the truth, that even a tyrant could be weak, could be humiliated. And from that moment, the fear in their hearts began to turn into scorn. Kofi, back within the palace, collapsed in panic. He stared into the mirror, only to see the twisted face and clouded eyes staring back. The laughter from the market rang in his head, repeating endlessly like 1,000 knives stabbing his heart. Darkness blanketed Zion Hill, but this time it carried more than fear. Within the thatched homes, tiny flames of hope flickered, the hope that the reign of a tyrant was drawing to an end. Do you think the humiliation in the market of Zion Hill was only the beginning? Or was it the final end of King Kofi's power? The night after being mocked in the marketplace, Kofi fled in desperation. He staggered along the dirt path leading toward the banks of the Ashanti, where the howling wind sounded like the mocking cries of the gods. His tattered robe clung to his body, his tangled hair fell over his deformed face, and his clouded eyes burned faintly in the darkness. No entourage, no guards, no kneeling crowds remained. Only a solitary figure trudging heavily toward the river that had long haunted him. An old hut emerged in the night, tucked beside a thicket of reeds. A faint fire flickered within, like a dim beacon for a lost soul. Kofi collapsed at the doorway, gasping like a man being hunted. Whoever had once lived in that hut, an old man, an old woman, was someone he had always despised, but now he had nowhere else to hide. The wooden door creaked open, and a bent old woman stepped out holding a small oil lamp. Her dim eyes glimmered when they recognized the figure of the king. She did not bow nor lower her head. Her voice rose, steady as waves breaking upon the shore. "King Kofi, you have not only defied your people, you have defied the goddess of the stream. Naomi, the golden-scaled mermaid, awaits you at the bottom of the river." The whisper pierced him like a cold blade. Naomi's image surged back, her desperate scream by the river, her eyes wide as her husband fell, her hands dragged across the sand, and the moment her body blazed with golden light before sinking beneath the water. Now she was no longer a victim. She had become the embodiment of justice, an immortal soul bound to the Ashanti. Kofi trembled, clutching his face. He no longer knew what was real and what was illusion. The sound of water outside seemed to morph into footsteps, into faint laughter, into sorrowful songs. Each wave reminded him that Naomi had never left. He wanted to flee, but his legs felt weighted, bound by invisible chains. In the village, rumors spread swiftly. People whispered that on the next full moon, the Ashanti would decide the king's fate. The crowd debated, half believing, half doubting, but all felt something approaching. They remembered Naomi's golden radiance, the strange miracles surrounding Amari, and the king's humiliation in the marketplace. The pieces fit together, leading to a night of destiny. The full moon rose, silver light spilling across the Ashanti's surface. The sky was clear, stars burning brightly as if bearing witness to what Zion Hill awaited. Villagers gathered by the riverbank, silent, their eyes fixed upon the shimmering water. None dared speak, for they knew any sound might disrupt the unseen ritual unfolding. Kofi was pulled from the hut not by human hands, but by a force he could not resist. He walked like a sleepwalker, his robe whipping in the night wind. The old woman followed with her oil lamp, her wrinkled face heavy with sorrow, a reluctant witness to fate. At the riverbank, Kofi dropped to his knees. He looked into the water, and for a moment the reflection staring back was not a twisted wretch. In the silver waves he saw Naomi, her hair dripping wet, her eyes blazing, her golden scaled tail shimmering in the moonlight. She did not speak, but her gaze was enough to make him tremble. It was the gaze of truth, of pain, of justice. The Ashanti rose around him, encircling his body. The wind wailed, tossing his hair, swallowing his choked cries. He tried to scream, but the sound vanished, leaving only frothing white bubbles. From a distance the villagers watched, fear and awe entwined. Was this the moment the throne itself would be swallowed by the river? Amari appeared by the bank, silent in the moonlight. Her eyes glowed with a golden gleam, reflecting the swirling waters. Some swore they saw Naomi's face overlap with Amari's, merging into one. Were they ever truly separate? Was Amari the extension of the mermaid's hand, the bearer of blessings and of judgment? The waters suddenly grew calm. Kofi vanished from the earth, leaving behind only ripples widening across the river's surface. The villagers froze, speechless. Then, from the wind, a faint song arose, sorrowful yet commanding, like a lullaby from the sea. They knew Naomi had spoken. At dawn, Zion Hill awoke in silence. There was no king, no shouts, no brutal tax collectors. But in every heart lingered a question. Had Kofi truly been devoured by the river, or merely imprisoned beneath its depths, waiting to return one day? And Amari, would she continue to bestow blessings, or become the messenger of vengeance to complete the curse? Darkness slowly lifted, and a new sun rose over the skies of Zion Hill, yet the echoes of that fateful night still lingered in the hearts of the villagers. They did not know whether Kofi had truly vanished into the depths of the Ashanti, or whether he was merely being held there, awaiting a greater judgment. The question had no answer, but in the villagers' eyes flickered a glimmer of hope, that tyranny would one day be repaid, and that justice, though delayed, would always find its way. The story of Naomi, the golden-scaled mermaid, and Amari, the bringer of blessings, was not merely a legend of a single village, but a mirror reflecting life today. It reminds us that no power can endure when built upon fear and bloodshed. Truth and compassion, even when buried, will always find a way to rise again, often appearing through the most ordinary of people. This is not only a story of vengeance or punishment, but also a lesson in faith. Faith in justice, faith in the strength of community, and faith that goodness can heal even the deepest of wounds. What do you think? Has Naomi completed her mission, or is this only the beginning of another journey? If you wish to continue with part 2, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and follow so you won't miss it. Perhaps the answer you seek lies in the next chapter of this tale. Thank you for accompanying us. Don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see people joining us from every corner of the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can continue bringing you many more.